This show is part of the RetroZap.com podcast network.
With Kygor guarding it, I'm sure the book is safe.
We must seek Kygor's blessing. Oh, Kygor! Kygor! Most mighty Kygor, we thank you for guarding the ancient book of the humanoids. Surround these travelers with your strength.
Hey, Ape fans, welcome to Talking Apes TV. This is your Planet of the Apes podcast, where we reintroduce and break down the Planet of the Apes TV series, the live-action series from 1974, and now the animated series titled Return to the Planet of the Apes, which aired during the Saturday morning cartoon block on NBC in 1975. Now, this was the year that another Planet of the Apes series ended abruptly, giving us no definitive resolution. More on that later. I am Richard Woloski, but when talking about such an Urko-tastic universe, I wouldn't be able to do it alone. Here is my Talking Apes TV co-host, the man who wants answers to the unanswerables, Mr. Mark Ogushewitz. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Rich. Are you ready to talk about the final episode of the Return to the Planet of the Apes series?
Little saddened, but I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm trying to psych myself into being ready for the last episode. I've had such a great time with the live-action series and now the animated series, and now both series are over.
Should we have a moment of silence?
And there you go. That moment of silence is dedicated to the officials over there at Netflix to get their act in gear and get a new live-action Planet of the Apes series going. What do you think? Should we hashtag that?
Let's do it.
Hashtag new Planet of the Apes TV series on Netflix. There we go.
Hey, why not? I mean, we got Star Trek rebooted in theaters, and now they're doing a Star Trek TV series. We got Planet of the Apes rebooted in theaters. I think it would be a good idea to put Planet of the Apes back on TV, and I think it would be more popular now.
Oh, of course it would be. And I think they could go so far with it. And just like the live-action series commented on the times of the 1970s, I would love to see them do a commentary on the present day and all this Trump stuff that's going on.
We would get a Donald Trump ape.
No, a commentary, but you know what? A Dr. Zaius-like Trump ape would be really funny. Oh, Netflix, jump on this. This is money on the table that you're just leaving there. Now, you know what, Mark? Before we get into this episode where we're going to be talking about Battle of the Titans, which, by the way, was my favorite Harry Hamlin movie of the 1980s. Oh, I'm sorry, that was Clash of the Titans. All right, never mind that. Let's talk about this. Now, last week when you and I were together, we were talking about another story that we really liked from the Tales from the Forbidden Zone short story book.
Right, and we had been talking about it because it's actually a continuation of one of our favorite episodes from the live-action series, The Trap, which is also, ironically enough, one of our most downloaded episodes for Talking Apes TV, the episode we did when we talked about The Trap. And I remember that we both thought that this was a very interesting idea for a story to continue with Urko after that particular episode, since he had so many conflicting things going on inside his head, especially after finding the poster that he finds in the subway system.
This is one of my favorite short stories of the whole book.
Oh, really?
Because I love myself some Urko, and the name of this short story is Who Is This Man? What Sort of Devil Is He? By Robert Greenberger.
And I'm not necessarily sure what the title means. Do you know what the title means?
I've got no idea what this title means. Not a clue. But you know what? You had me at Urko. There you go. I've got to say, I love the story. However, it does have one huge fault to it. But before we go there, let's give everyone a quick synopsis of this short story.
Okay.
Once again, this takes place right after The Trap. Urko has just fallen into the subway station with Pete, so he's injured. So this takes place right afterwards, where his wife Elta, which he did mention in that episode, is nursing him back to health, and we are introduced to his son Urso, who I never knew even existed. Now, at this time, Urko's got to stay in bed. Elta is really making sure he does not damage himself, he does not overextend himself the way Urko has been known to do, and this gives Urko a little time to reflect. And he goes back to that poster he saw down the subway of a gorilla in a cage with a little boy handing him a banana.
Right, and it's his thoughts that go back to the poster, because he doesn't actually have the poster.
No, he did put it in his glove, but it had fallen out. They do refer to that, because he took the poster down off the wall, put it in his glove so he could use it later on as evidence, but who knows where that poster is.
Actually, if you think back to the end of the episode, you'll remember that it's Zako who actually has the poster, because remember that final shot where he's ripping it apart?
Oh, right. Okay, that makes more sense now.
And something else that we might want to be a little bit more specific on is the fact that the poster wasn't just of a boy feeding a gorilla, but if I'm remembering correctly, it was of a human boy feeding a gorilla. Which, basically goes against everything that Urko or any ape has been taught about the nature of humans and apes and their placement in the hierarchy of things.
Right.
So his thoughts go back to the poster and
now he's thinking, is everything I've ever learned in my life a lie? And for apes, they have a big issue with this because the lawgiver is the lawgiver and whatever they say is gospel. But now he's beginning to think, is all of this a lie? And he doesn't want to go that way. He doesn't want to think that all these years of education is just down the tubes, and to make matters worse, that humans had reigned supreme on Earth before everything turned around somehow and apes got to that position where they were the supreme race. So it's really interesting seeing him struggle, not only with himself, but he's struggling with his son Urso, who he's at the age where he starts to question things. And he's questioning everything about these astronauts and these humans, and are they so bad? Could you imagine bringing this up to Urko? If you weren't his son, he'd bring out his pistol and shoot you right there for making a statement like that.
It's actually really interesting because we really get inside Urko's head in this short story. And one of the interesting things about the short story is the fact that Urko truly loves his wife and his son, and he trusts them enough that even though he shouldn't tell anybody about this poster, he tells them. And it gives us an opportunity to really see Urko struggle with his feelings about this poster inside his head, because now he's dealing with his son who doesn't understand why the humans are so bad. At one point, he even brings up the fact that the humans helped to save him, from the subway system in that episode, The Trap. And Urko, who wants to remain with his beliefs and believing the things that he's learned, is not only questioning things in his own mind because of the poster that he saw, but also his son is questioning it as well. And I don't want to go into too much detail about this story. I think that people should read it and discover it themselves, but these are really interesting concepts that the author of this story, Robert Greenberger, brings up. It wasn't my favorite story in the whole entire book, but it's one of my favorite stories in the whole entire book. And because it's so Urko-centric, I understand why it's your favorite story in the book.
Now, being centered around Urko is one thing, but it's just 20 pages. And for me, that's like a big selling point, because I'm a very slow reader. So I was able to whip through these 20 pages, and it starts to really pick up when Urko refers to these other astronauts that have landed. And he says there had been others to make a similar claim. That sentence right there, I had read like 25 times just to make sure I got it correctly. And I'm thinking, does he know Taylor? Does he know Brent? I got really, really excited. But these other astronauts turned out to be people named Thomas Lefevre, Bengston, and Charles. Now, I can tell you the fate of these other astronauts, but there are other astronauts.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how to feel about that, though, because now it was like more astronauts, more things into the timeline. And at first, I thought that the story was going to take a turn for the worst. I at first thought it was Taylor. When I found out it wasn't Taylor, it's kind of like, there's more astronauts. This isn't good. But the way that this author handles this story and allows us to really explore Urko's mind and his reaction to all this, everything that seemed like it should have gone wrong, the author does 100% right. And this story, which could have easily gone the wrong way, is literally one of the best stories in the book.
Now, earlier I had said there was one thing that I really did not like. Come on, as Urko is walking around with Elta, going to the marketplace, and he's like wearing robes, his casual clothes, I really wanted there to be a point about him wearing his helmet. That would have been just a funny visual. There was never even a mention about his helmet in the whole story, so that kind of saddened me.
I don't remember whether they mentioned his helmet or not, so I'll take your word on that.
Believe me, they never mentioned his helmet.
Oh man, that's a shame.
Now, After you read it, was there one thing that you took away from this story to wrap things up?
In a non-spoilery way, I'd say the thing that I took most away from the story was a new sense of Urko. The fact that the short story continues the story of the trap and also allows us to really get inside Urko's head like never before. I think that when I go back and rewatch the live-action series, I'm going to have these thoughts that were put into his head in this story and the questioning and all that. I'm going to have that all in my head when I watch all the episodes after the trap. And so when I'm watching all the episodes after the trap, and as I'm watching him do things, I'm wondering if I'm going to be putting different thoughts and different motivations into his head now that I have this story to reflect back on.
And this story really does capture Urko from the TV series. And I really want to believe that the Urko we see in the animated series is a totally different Urko. I don't want to think these two are the same Urko whatsoever.
No, I don't like to think of him as the same Urko just because what Mark Leonard does with Urko in the live-action series is just so great. And as much as I find the Urko in the animated series entertaining at times, that's really all he is he's really entertaining and he's really fun to watch. Whereas the Urko in the live-action series, he's somebody that we grow to care about and grow to like. Mark Leonard created a character, whereas in the Return to the Planet of the Apes, they created just something for entertainment.
Yeah.
So I think there's different levels, and I'm not saying one's wrong and one's right, because when I watch Return to the Planet of the Apes, I enjoy watching Urko. But when I watch the live-action series, I'm not only enjoying watching Urko, but I'm also really involved in who he is.
Right. Yeah. But if there's one thing I'm going to take away from this story is that maybe Urko was right. Maybe humans are just messing everything up. And I'm not going to elaborate on that, but
Okay.
Think about that.
I'm going to think back to the story and see if I can think about what you said. But everybody should just go read the story. I'm sure if they're reading the book, they're going to read the story sooner or later.
Yeah. And we want to ask all the apes out there to explain to us, what does the title mean? Who is this man? What sort of devil is he? If you can do that, we'd really appreciate it. All right, Mark, with that, let's now get into this episode, Battle of the Titans. Now, this is the 13th and sadly last episode of the Return to the Planet of the Apes series and aired November 29th, 1975. Now, to give a brief summary of this episode, Urko has been relieved of his duties because of his recent negligence involving his leadership and failed attempts at capturing Blue Eyes and the rest of the humanoids. With their main adversary out of the way, Cornelius and Zira take this opportunity in telling the Senate about how humans were not always subservient to apes and their original place on the planet. Now, Mark, what are your initial thoughts of this episode, Battle of the Titans?
Well, let me put it to you this way. My initial reaction to this episode was that it feels like 2 episodes cut down to 1. And by that I mean things seem to happen and conclusions seem to be gotten to so fast at times that it feels almost like certain sections could have actually been their own episode. If the writers were just given the time to really allow these segments to breathe and work the best way possible, they really could have been their own episodes. It was almost like they had 2 full episodes ready to go, found out that the series was over and that the network was only going to let them air 1 more episode. So they took the 2 episodes they already had and started editing everything down to fit into the time span of, the 23, 24 minutes that they're allowed to have for 1 single episode. And this, of course, would then force the producers to end up with scenes that were rushed and conclusions that were too simple because they didn't have enough time to really explore more complicated and better conclusions. And we'll discuss this in a little bit more detail as we go through the episode. But on this level, the episode doesn't work. But I'm also going to say that even with that, it wasn't a bad episode. It wasn't as bad as like Invasion of the Underdwellers or Terror on Ice Mountain. It's probably more of a middle-of-the-road episode, kind of bordering on average. And I did kind of enjoy watching it. I had a good time watching it. but it still doesn't work as a full, well-rounded episode. Not to mention the fact that Ron, Dr. Zaius, and Nova are mysteriously absent throughout the whole entire episode. For a final episode in the series, you figure we would have gotten a fair share of these characters, but nope, they're not even anywhere in the episode. And we get very little Urko, and that's kind of always a negative for an episode. And finally, and you hinted to this a little bit earlier on, the way the episode/series ends is incredibly unsatisfying for certain reasons that we'll get into when we get to that part of the episode, when we get to the end of the episode.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Now, for me, I loved seeing Urko's devious scheming. As crazy as Urko is, I just love knowing that that part of his brain is still fully functioning, and his schemes, whether they're really out there, they make sense in Urko's world. And I love seeing that. And like others, I don't believe this was ever a filler episode. Now, there are episodes we have seen, it's like, well, that 22 minutes could have been a minute and a half. But this one here was just chock full of fun and excitement.
Yeah, this is the opposite. This 20 minutes could have been 40 minutes. It could have been 2 episodes.
Could have been a made-for-TV movie.
Yeah.
Now, it was building to a future while leaving season 1 behind with character and episode callbacks, which makes the season feel complete. The whole season was wrapped up and felt complete, as if to say, all right, now, buckle yourselves in, because we're going to take you on a roller coaster for season 2, which never, sadly, happened, which is a big disappointment for a lot of TV series, that they end in a, hey, come on, network, we're leaving people with a cliffhanger, where network's like, we don't care, you're not making any money. Next, where's Chico and the Man?
And then they kind of just leave you with this cliffhanger, which we're going to get into much later.
But one of the elements I do love about this episode, it has not one, but two returning big monsters.
I knew you were going to love that. Matter of fact, with that, why don't we actually get into the episode?
Let's fade up. And we're now on the last episode of The Return to the Planet of the Apes.
Okay, so we open up on a shot of a couple of cannons or howitzers or whatever you want to call them, and we pan over to the ape army headquarters. And there are 2 gorillas standing guard outside, and we find out that this episode pretty much starts off right after the events of the last episode when Urko was suspended for 3 months.
Here comes Urko. You think we should salute?
That would be foolish. He's no longer our general.
Good morning, General.
Do you mock me, Private? Don't you know those bloated bureaucrats in the Simian Senate took away my rank for 3 months?
You will always be my general, sir.
You're a smart soldier. Colonel Rotok is your leader now. You must obey only him.
Yes, sir.
Obey Colonel Rotok. Remember that. Obey! Obey! Obey!
I actually like this opening. It continues the storyline, and yes, I still kind of have issues with Urko's punishment just being a 3-month suspension, especially after everything he's done wrong in the past episodes, but we don't need to go into that. Listeners can go back to our last episode and hear my feelings on that. But what I do like here is how split the 2 guerrilla soldiers are regarding Urko's suspension. One is not going to salute Urko, while the other insists on saluting Urko because he says Urko will always be his general. And I kind of like this idea of opposing viewpoints between different guerrillas in the army, where maybe some of the guerrilla soldiers are going to listen to the council and they're not going to pay attention to Urko for 3 months, whereas some of them are going to keep their allegiances and still be incredibly loyal to Urko. And I thought that was kind of interesting, and I really liked that.
Yeah, so did I. And I really like the way at the end of the clip that Urko keeps on repeating, obey, 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 in a very brainwashing way. Now, what did you take away from that?
Okay, so at first, Urko comes in and he makes it very clear that Colonel Rotok is the new gorilla in charge and that they are supposed to listen to everything that Colonel Rotok says. And at first, that seemed really, really out of character for Urko. Because when have we ever heard Urko tell the gorillas that somebody else was in charge? When has he ever relinquished that charge to another gorilla? Even though he's been suspended, you would figure he'd be fighting it. But here he is instead relinquishing that charge and basically telling these gorillas that they are to do everything that Colonel Rotok says, and he emphasizes it when he says what you just said. He says, obey, obey, obey. And he repeats the word obey because he wants them to obey Colonel Rotok. And like I said, at first this seemed really out of character for General Urko until I realized what was going on. And Urko was actually kind of being smart because of something that's going to come up in a couple of minutes. He's got something scheming in his head, and there's a reason why he's trying to make sure that these two guerrilla soldiers obey Colonel Rotok. And I'm going to leave it there, and we're going to get into it when we get into that further scene.
That's why in my initial thoughts, I loved his devious scheming. Even though they seem very crazy, he has got a clear, laser-focused decision about what he's going to do, and I love it.
Right. Well, right here, when you're watching the show, you're thinking, well, that doesn't seem like Urko, and maybe not even liking it. But then when you get to that scene we're going to talk about in a little bit, you realize, no, that's actually kind of smart with the way he's acting. We're getting a little bit of character development right at the beginning of the show. We just don't realize it until we get a little bit further into the show. And it's kind of interesting.
He doesn't just repeat obey once. He goes on and on. Like, there's a point. Hey, guys, read between the lines here.
Yeah, but what I like is when he says, Colonel Rotok is your leader now. You must only obey him. It almost sounds like he's saying, I'm not going to be leading you anymore. You shouldn't even be listening to what I'm saying because you should only obey Colonel Rotok. And it just seemed out of character. But once again, literally 2 minutes later in the episode, it all makes sense. And you realize, oh, this is actually smart writing on the part of the writers for this episode.
All right, from there, we cut to Cornelius and Zira in their lab.
And Zira says something that feels a little out of character for me.
I have to confess, Cornelius, I could let myself feel sorry for him.
Sorry for General Urko? Don't be ridiculous.
Well, how would you feel if the Senate voted to take away our laboratory for 3 months?
Firstly, the Senate has no reason to punish us for cruelty and disobedience. Secondly, Urko deserves to lose his rank and forfeit his pay.
But General Urko is still a simian being and must have normal feelings of shame.
The facts dispute your theory, Zira. If you want to feel sorry for someone, think what could happen to the humanoids when Urko gets back into power.
You mean if he wants revenge for his disgrace?
Precisely.
Then we'll just have to keep him out of power.
The book.
What book?
The ancient humanoid book I found in the archaeological digs. It proves that humanoids preceded apes on Earth.
Perfect. Now that Urko is out of power, we could risk the journey to the high mountain apes and get the book out of hiding.
Blue Eyes and his astronaut friends could help us. We could fly to the mountains in their flying machine and return in time for the next session of the Senate.
Brilliant. Every time I think I married you for your beautiful eyes, you do something that reminds me I was really attracted to your exceptional brain.
I could say the same about you, Zira.
If you do, you'll hurt my feelings.
Now, I want to get back to that final statement. I really, really do. That Zira makes.
Yeah, me too.
But before we do that...
What is going on with that?
But before we do that, let's discuss the scene.
No, let's just discuss that final statement.
No, let's... Because I made a statement before we went into the clip. Let's finish that off, and we will get to this statement of Zira's, because it's really weird.
But then can we start with the fact that they are referring to the brilliant episode Terror on Ice Mountain?
No, we don't need to start with that. Although they are referring to it. But before we get into the book, I want to get into the fact that Zira starts off by saying that she feels sorry for Urko because he's lost his command for 3 months. And that just seems a little out of place for Zira. It doesn't seem like something Zira would say. But now, that being said, I have to admit that it doesn't necessarily bother me because I actually kind of like the conversation that Cornelius and Zira have regarding this. Because, like me, Cornelius doesn't understand why Zira's saying what she's saying either.
Yeah, but Zira has always had more of a compassion for the humans, so this whole scene felt very odd that she's feeling sorry for Urko.
Yeah, it seemed really, really out of place. But once again, because Cornelius puts my feelings out on the table and argues what I was thinking when she said it, I feel like the scene still kind of worked.
Yeah.
Even though I don't feel Zira would say that, it still kind of worked because of Cornelius's response and the conversation that they have.
Yeah.
It felt weird, but I still kind of liked it.
And it's Cornelius who's now taking on the Zira role of the feeling compassionate for the humans, and he's feeling sorry for the humans if Urko ever gets his rank back, which is more of a Zira line. It seems like these two characters have switched places.
Right, but I like the fact that Cornelius is saying what he's saying because it's character growth for him. He's getting closer to the humans. He's starting to feel for the humans. He's no longer as skeptical. You're right, Cornelius always kind of wanted to look out for the apes as well, but here I like the fact that, he doesn't understand Zira, what she's saying, and that he is a little concerned about, the fact that when Urko's back in charge, he might want to have revenge.
So Cornelius is progressing, whereas Zira is regressing. Now, let's take a step back and remind everyone that the book they're referring to tells about how humans weren't as subservient and their place on Earth. And in the episode Terror on Ice Mountain, Bill and Cornelius had gone up to the top of the mountain and had the big ice gorilla, Kygor, protect this book so no one would ever get their hands on it, because if Urko or any other gorilla soldier ever did, they would destroy it, destroying their whole case for a resolution of humans and apes all living together harmoniously.
Right. There were pictures in the book, and I believe there were things in the book that just didn't make sense to the teachings they have now, and basically said, humans at one point had evolved before apes. And in reality, there was a time when humans were actually more intelligent than apes. And so now, Cornelius and Zira, they feel like this is the perfect time for them to go get the book and do their plan of bringing it to the council to try and convince the council with the proof that's in this book to, maybe look at humans differently. And it sounded like a good plan at first until I started to think about it. And maybe I shouldn't have thought too much about it. But it seems like one book wouldn't be enough.
No.
And as much as this is the perfect time to bring the book out because Urko can't do anything about it, he has no power, or at least we think he has no power, it seems to me that you would need more than one book to prove this. I don't know, it just seems like this one small piece of evidence, wouldn't be enough. You'd want to pile up the evidence before going to the council.
Yeah.
And so all the way through the episode, I'm thinking to myself, well, how are they going to prove this with one book? This doesn't make sense. Matter of fact, maybe the council will, read this book and see the information inside of it and feel like this book is actually dangerous to the apes. And things might actually go very differently than the way that Zira and Cornelius are thinking it's going to go. So is it really a smart plan to bring this book to the Senate? But I let it go because I figured, at the end of this episode, we're going to see that scene probably where they bring it to the Senate, and we'll see how it plays out. And I'll pass my judgment after I see how it plays out. So all the way through the episode, I started also thinking, so let's hope we get the scene where it plays out. Do we? Don't we? Well, everybody's just going to have to wait till we get to the end of the episode to find out.
I just hope that there's a Kinko's up there on Ice Mountain, because they need to make some copies of this book.
That's a smart idea.
If they just give the original to the Senate, of course the Senate's not going to want to believe that humans were, I don't want to use the word reign supreme on Earth, because I don't think that's what the book was showing, but humans weren't slaves. Let's go with that. Humans weren't slaves. And the Senate's not going to want to know that because, like Urko, they don't want to believe all these centuries of teachings is all down the tubes because of one book.
Well, isn't the book called A Day at the Zoo? So doesn't it show like apes in cages and humans outside?
Yes.
So that could be considered very dangerous. So I'm not necessarily sure how bringing this to the Senate and Zaius is a good thing. But once again, if they show it to me and it makes sense, then I'll be on board with it. I'm just not seeing it now. And at this point, as I'm watching the episode, I'm hoping that we're going to get a logical conclusion at the end. But once again, I don't want to give away the end, so we'll just leave this to the fact that I had no idea how this book was going to work. I couldn't wait to get to the end to find out. And the listeners are going to have to wait till we get to the end to find out if I was satisfied with how they concluded. animated it.
And being an animated series, we don't know if the pictures in the book were live shots or cartoons. Because if the pictures were just cartoons, what would make Zaya say, well, these are just drawings done by an angry ape or an angry human?
I didn't even think about that. That's interesting.
So the whole book idea, I think they just need to really think through before presenting this to the council and Zaius.
Right, but my whole thing was basically, how is one book going to do that? Aren't you going to need a lot more proof than that? But, who knows? Maybe we'll watch the end of the show and they'll give us what we want and then everything will make sense, or maybe we'll watch the end of the show and it won't. We'll get to that when we get to that. But meanwhile, I know you're dying to get back to this, and that's Zira's statement.
Yes, that's Zira. You got a lot of explaining to do.
Basically, everybody just heard it, but I'm going to repeat it anyway. Zira says, every time I think I married you for your beautiful eyes, you do something that reminds me I was actually attracted to your exceptional brain. And Cornelius responds, I could say the same about you. And Zira doesn't like that. She says, if you do, you'll hurt my feelings. Is she like the only woman on Earth that would rather be recognized for her physical traits as opposed to her mind?
And this is where the objectification for women all started, thanks to Zira.
I mean, that's basically what she's saying. She's saying, I didn't want you to fall in love for who I really am. I want you to fall in love for, how I look.
That's just weird.
All right, so that was kind of weird. Zira's just, maybe she's drinking in this scene. Because first she's sympathizing with Urko, and now she wants to find out that her husband loves her more for her physical features than her mind.
Maybe she really has a hang up for her eyes. That's what she wants everyone to be sold on. Her eyes, not her brain. All right? Guys, if you're looking at me, look at my eyes, not my brain. Look at the eyes, not the brain. All right, with that, let's move on. Because in this next scene, Cornelius and Zira are on their way to New Valley.
And there's really very little reason for this scene other than to show Cornelius and Zira on their way to New Valley. There's really nothing much more to it. And this scene probably could have just been yanked out.
Now let's cut to Urko and Castro. I'm sorry, Rotuck.
And Colonel Rotuck is the new gorilla in charge of the army.
I cannot just sit by for 3 months, Colonel Rotuck.
What about Dr. Zaius in the Senate?
They are fools. In 3 months, the humanoid defenses will be completed.
Our army would have great difficulty moving against a fortress.
When the humanoids are strong, the Senate will see that I'm right. But then it would be too late.
What can we do?
Here, the unprotected west flank of New Valley. From this point, you will carry out my plan for the attack.
You want me to lead the army?
It is your responsibility as acting general.
I do not have experience.
You have only to follow my instructions. This operation must be the most carefully guarded secret in Ape City. Every humanoid must be captured if we are to be safe from Blue Eyes.
You're sure the troops will follow me?
Of course. And when the campaign is over, we'll both be national heroes.
You'll be General Urko once more.
No, you'll be general. I'll be president.
To victory.
Total victory. Over Zaius, over the Senate, over the humanoids.
Wow, that's quite a scene there. That speaks volumes. And just to go back a couple of steps, he had to have been designed, Rotuck had to have been designed after Fidel Castro. The similarities are just too striking.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but you might be right.
Oh yeah, this is a sure call out to the 70s right there, with that beard and that little mustache and his glimmer.
So now, this is the scene we were talking about earlier when I mentioned that Urko seemed to be acting a little out of character. But we also mentioned that later on we were going to find out that there were underlying intentions to the way he was acting. This is where we see that he was just scheming. Here we find out that he's actually still in charge. He's still giving all the orders. He's giving the orders to Rotuck. And earlier when he told the soldiers to only obey Rotuck, he knew that he was going to be pulling the puppet strings that controlled Rotuck. So by the soldiers obeying Rotuck, they would be obeying Urko. So he found a workaround that would get the soldiers obeying him. They're just going to be doing it through Rotuck. There is one strange thing about this scene, though, and that was Rotuck doesn't seem very up to the challenge. Matter of fact, he asks Urko, "You want me to lead the army?" When Urko was suspended for 3 months, didn't someone tell Rotuck that he was in charge?
Not until 2 minutes ago.
I mean, would they leave it for Urko to tell him that? And why are they putting someone so unsure of himself in charge of the army? He's saying stuff like, I do not have experience, you're sure the troops will follow me. I mean, he's questioning the situation, whereas any colonel who's looking to work their way up in the ranks would be like, don't worry about it, Urko, I have my own plan. I can take care of this myself.
Right, but he doesn't need to answer to Urko or prove himself to Urko, because right now Urko's a crossing guard.
Right, but he is answering to Urko. He is going to do what Urko wants him to do. He's one of those soldiers that is still going to be loyal to Urko. It seems like if I was put in that situation, I would be like, wow, this is my chance to move forward. And by the time Urko is put back in charge and is general again, I'm going to be general too. I'll be general of a different army, but this is my chance to prove myself. But he really actually seems like he's questioning himself. Like, he doesn't want to move up in the ranks. He doesn't want this opportunity. Please, Urko, tell me what to do. I just want to know why Zaius and the Senate would put him in charge if, he seems so unsure of himself the way he is, because that would come off. And so why is Zaius and the council putting him in charge? And I also got another question. This has to do with the last episode. Here in this scene, Urko seems very concerned with the humanoids having enough time to build their fortress. So why did he waste all that time in the last episode going after the underdwellers? Another reason for that last episode not to exist.
Leave the underdwellers alone, okay? They've been through enough. All right, so with that, you ready to move along?
I'm ready to move along, because we then go to New Valley, and Bill and Jeff are working on something that looks like a picnic table when they notice a car approaching in the distance. And it's Cornelius and Zira, who completely forego the use of any small compact mirror this time. They just drive straight into New Valley.
Another 6 months, we'll have all the comforts of home.
Yeah, Daniel Boone's home.
What's that?
Urko's men?
No, looks like Cornelius and Zira.
Why would they risk coming here?
Let's find out.
There is no risk, Jeff.
Urko has been stripped of all his power.
He can't lead his army against you.
That's the best news I've heard since we landed.
This gives us the perfect opportunity to retrieve the ancient book.
What book? The one I found that proves humanoids were actually civilized before apes.
Cornelius and I hit it with the mountain apes, Judy.
It's the one piece of solid evidence that could convince the Senate to grant your people full rights and end Urko's senseless attacks.
You think your Senate is ready for such a step?
We have to start sometime.
But we have to act now while Urko can't stop us.
This scene is basically just Zira and Cornelius repeating what they talked about earlier regarding the book to Bill, Jeff, and Judy. But this scene is also the point in the episode where, while I was watching it, I began thinking that bringing the book to the council might actually be a bad idea. I know we talked about this earlier, but this is the actual point in the episode, while I was watching it, where this realization came to me because Bill asks, you think your Senate is ready for such a step? And that kind of struck me, and that's where I started thinking, yeah, I wonder if they might think that the humans are more dangerous after seeing this book. So, but once again, at this point while watching the show, I'm willing to wait and see what happens.
All right, so we've set up what they're going to do.
Right. And then we cut to Urko driving in a
Castromobile.
Ah, I see what you did there. And he's with Rotuk. And they're driving past a group of soldiers
who do not look very happy.
No, and I'm sorry, this is a little issue that I want to ask you about, because Urko's been suspended, and at this point, one has to wonder why he's not at home. He seems awfully active with the army for someone who's supposed to be on leave. Urko hands Rotuk a sealed envelope with his attack plans in it, and tells Rotuk to follow it exactly.
Here's my attack plan, Colonel. Follow it exactly. Everything depends on you now. The military future of apedom is in your hands.
Men, you are about to embark on the most important mission ever assigned to an ape soldier. From this moment, there will be no communication with anyone, including your families or officials of government.
Let those humanoid lovers find it out after I have the upper hand.
Move out!
So, in an earlier scene, Urko says this operation must be the most carefully guarded secret in Ape City. And here, Rotuk says to his men that from this moment forward, there will be no communication with anyone, including your families or officials of government, because they don't want anyone at this moment in time to know that Urko is still in charge, or at least Urko's still acting like he's in charge. but we're seeing him present in the army at all times. Why are we not having secret meetings? Why is he trying to keep this a secret, but he's continuously in front of everyone where everybody can see him? He's continuously out in the open with the army doing his stuff, as opposed to having like discreet secret meetings in some cave somewhere where he won't get discovered by the council.
At least give him his underdweller robe back. That'd be interesting because the other apes would not know who this was. They could see the outline of his helmet under the robe, but I think that'd be really interesting if he kept that underdweller robe and just moved about with that.
I feel like it would have been more interesting is if we had these secret meetings, and this would have opened up the show into some really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and it would have given more relevance to that opening scene where you have one guard being wary and one guard saying, hey, yeah, this is Urko. He's always my general. So it would have given that more weight.
Right, because that's pretty much dropped from this point forward. Everybody's now following Urko, and I really like that about that opening scene, and I wish it had continued throughout the rest of the episode. And one way they could have done that is by having Urko in these secret meetings only addressing those guerrillas that were on his side, as opposed to everybody out in the open.
Right.
So we now dissolve to Bill, Jeff, Judy, Zira, and Cornelius, and they're sitting around the picnic table that Bill and Jeff seemed to be working on a little bit earlier. This is the first time where I kind of said, where is Ron? Wouldn't he be in on this conversation?
Right.
But as we discussed earlier, Ron, for some reason, is not in this episode. Because this would have been a really good place to have him.
And Nova, you know what? Just give her some screen time. She doesn't ask for much.
Right. I mean, she even got a shot in the last episode. She got 2 shots in the last episode, I believe. A couple of shots, at least.
Yeah, I think she was off to working on the Chico and the Man animated series at this point. She knew the fate.
Right, but here's Bill, Jeff, Judy, Zira, and Cornelius, and they're continuing their conversation.
I agree with you, Zira. This would be a good time to go back and get the book. But it's 600 miles away. A month's journey. The mountains there are impassable, and the weather is treacherous.
No problem, Bill. You can fly there in a few hours.
Fly?
In the aircraft. Isn't that a wonderful idea?
I'm afraid not, Zira. Those peaks are too rugged.
There'd be no place to land.
Then you'll just have to walk.
That could take weeks.
We'd miss the next Senate meeting.
There must be some way.
Where's that flying balloon? Perhaps we could use it again. It worked before.
Let's go look at it.
So here they are trying to figure out how to get the book. And Zira has what she calls a wonderful idea by wanting to take the plane. But Bill shoots that down immediately because the peaks are too rugged, and that's going to make it too dangerous.
But let's go in a balloon.
Oh my god, I didn't even think about that. That's funny.
How about let's make a paper airplane. That would be the best solution of all.
Then I'm not sure what to think of this, because Bill says that it would be a 600-mile trek. And before they get to the balloon, Zira suggests they walk. 600 miles? Are you going to walk 600 miles? I'm not going to walk 600 miles. But they do remember about the balloon, and they do remember that they did make the trip safely once before with the balloon. I have a feeling that, they forgot how dangerous that trip was, because it wasn't an easy trip in that balloon before. But they're now going to go get the balloon from the Terror on Ice Mountain episode, and they're going to try and use that to get the 600 miles up the mountain. And then we dissolve to some caves where Bill and Jeff obviously had decided to hide the balloon, and Judy begins to question the condition of the balloon.
You mean that pile of junk carried you to Kaigor's mountain?
When it was filled with air.
It'll need patching, but I think it'll work.
You'll never get me up in that thing.
Really? The way you love the airplane, I'd have thought you couldn't wait to balloon.
I could wait forever.
Come on, everybody. Give me a hand.
I know you're going to love this statement by me. I think that Judy shouldn't judge the condition of the balloon so fast, because she calls it a pile of junk. And isn't that what they called the Millennium Falcon in The Force Awakens? Before they get in it, don't they call it a pile of junk?
Yep. Yes, they do.
And look how that turned out. So, Judy maybe doesn't have anything to worry about. So they decide that they're going to fix the pile of junk, and we dissolve to Rotuk's army as they're driving their jeeps towards New Valley, and they stop to set up camp.
Halt, officers. Report to the command post.
Establish your defense perimeters.
Secure communications.
We will bivouac here. Lieutenant, arrange for reconnaissance.
Yes, sir. We should be about 4 miles from the humanoid fortification. Sergeant, send out a scouting party to verify our position.
So did you hear the word that Rotok used when telling the lieutenant what to do?
Yes, I did.
He says, "We will bivouac here." Bivouac. Once again, the writers are using big words. And we talked about this in another episode. Well, they're doing it again here. But this time, the thing is, after he uses the word bivouac, we cut to a shot of the ape camp, which has now officially been assembled. And we see a lot of tents set up. But if we go back to the word bivouac, I looked it up. And its meaning is a temporary camp without tents or cover, used especially by soldiers or mountaineers. I'm seeing lots of tents in this camp.
Now, let me ask you, are you using a human dictionary or an ape dictionary?
I'll say maybe that's it. I'm using a human dictionary.
Well, Mark, that's your problem. Come on. After all this time.
It's like the writers want to show how smart they are by using this really big word, and then they get it wrong. But the important thing about this scene is the fact that the apes are going to stop here and they're going to build camp, and a couple of ape soldiers have been sent out as a scouting party to verify their position of being 4 miles from New Valley. And now we're moving at a pretty good pace with this episode as we dissolve to Bill, Jeff, Judy, Cornelius, and Zira, still no Ron, and they are fixing up the balloon and getting it ready for the journey.
This isn't a balloon, it's one big patch.
This time, I'm going to insist that Cornelius stay on the ground.
I must go, Zira. Only Bill and I know the way.
And we want the High Lama to realize that apes and humanoids are together on this.
I don't know if I can go through that terrible waiting while you hang in thin air.
We made one safe journey, we'll make another.
Please don't go.
Relax, Zira. There's nothing to fear. Let's inflate the balloon.
Didn't Cornelius see Terror on Ice Mountain? Nothing to fear.
Did he not see it? He was in it.
There was 35 minutes of padded shots of the balloon being whipped around this ice storm. What do you mean nothing to fear?
But you know something? This is actually a scene that I really like. And it's because I really like how Zira is showing concern for Cornelius. It adds to her character, and it's like character development. Even this late into the series, knowing that it's the final episode, they're still developing her character a little bit. And I also like that Judy keeps on about the condition of the balloon as well, because even though I wish she'd been a little bit more positive about it, I think it adds something to her character too. And I like these little character traits that are being given to them. The writers are pretty much saying that they're not going to forget about the characters just for all the action. I mean, we got 2 monsters coming up, but we're not going to just concentrate on the monsters. We still, have faith that we can build these characters and keep creating new traits for the characters. And I really like that.
Zira should have batted her eyes. That would have kept Cornelius there. It's all in the eyes. It's all in the eyes. All right, from there, we cut to a 10-second insert shot of a ape patrol rolling by the frame, and we cut right back out of it again.
Right. It seems like a pretty pointless shot, but, since they come back in a little bit, maybe it's just an introduction to these apes for when they come back. Also, maybe they're using it as a passage of time, because when we do come back to the balloon is fully inflated, and Zira is still concerned.
I'm too nervous to watch.
Then close your eyes.
That makes me even more nervous.
Ready up there?
Ready!
How's the wind?
North by northeast. Perfect.
Then you're off.
And they launch the balloon, and it sets sail high into the sky. And as we go to a shot of Bill and Cornelius, I notice something interesting.
The music?
No.
That's some nice flying music.
Right, but I'm talking about the fact that Bill is wearing a nice warm jacket that he probably got from Sears, unlike in Terror on Ice Mountain, where he went off in the balloon to the cold, icy mountains in just a t-shirt.
Right, well, you know what? Maybe Sears is starting to give him some on the back end. You do all this modeling. We can give you a parka. Here you go.
I guess the artists were maybe thinking ahead this time, too, you know?
Yeah. You gotta tie in with those product placement deals.
And as the balloon goes sailing upwards, we get a shot of the two gorilla soldiers from a minute ago that were just introduced a minute ago, still in their Jeep, and they notice the balloon.
What's that? Let's get out of here before it spots us.
Now, two things happen here. One, the gorillas try to be smart, and I say try, by wanting to get away before whoever is in the balloon spots them. And at first, this seems kind of smart, especially if, because I'm guessing that they know who's in the balloon.
I don't know if they know that.
Well, later when they report to the gorillas, they say the humans have a balloon. And so since they're near New Valley, I can see why they would assume that.
Well, I don't know if they know which humans are in there.
No, but they do know humans are in that, and they don't want to get spotted because they're about to attack. Of course, we're going to find out that Rotok doesn't have secrecy of the attack on his mind. But here, the gorillas are thinking that, and they say, let's get out of here before it spots us. My question is, why don't they shoot it down? If they think that that's a humanoid balloon, why don't they shoot it down and capture the humanoids that are in the balloon?
I think they need permission or the go-ahead or a written statement from Rotok before they do something like that, or they just want to go back and say, hey, we saw this thing. Of course, Rotok's going to say, did you shoot it down? And the soldier will say, no, we should have listened to Mark in the first place. That's how it plays out in my head.
Well, if they listen to our podcast the way they should. Anyway, so as the gorillas put their Jeep into gear and drive off, their wheel kicks up a large rock, which skitters across the land and lands in the lagoon, which wakes up the monster bird from the Attack from the Clouds episode.
And let's just say that this creature has the most annoying sound effect of anything ever in an animated series.
Let's remind listeners who this creature is. If you remember the Attack from the Clouds episode, the attack that came from the clouds was this monster bird that attacked the plane that Judy was flying. And if you remember when we left that episode, the plane, I think it was the wheel, had hit the bird and sent him to his doom into the lagoon. But that closing shot gave us those bubbles coming up from the water at the end of the episode, trying to make us assume that the monster bird might be back. Well, he is back. I just want to know, was he under the water the whole time? Because Attack from the Clouds was a number of episodes ago.
I wouldn't assume he'd been under there the whole time waiting for his cue.
Well, I mean, he's got a cave to live in. Why would he keep going back under the water unless he was still there from before?
I'm going to guess that they live in a very hot environment. He's going under there just to cool himself off. It all makes sense to me.
So, anyway, the monster bird's cool. I'm really happy to see him back. I've always liked him. I don't agree that he's a bad bird like everybody in the episode, but we already had that discussion.
Now, we should have known that this beast would come back because if you recall in the opening montage, we do see this bird cut into the very 70s tile wipes.
Right, but does that mean he's going to come back? That could just mean he's in an episode, which means he would have only been in the one episode.
Well, I don't think they would feature this one creature out of all of them. I think they had a plan for this guy.
Right, but I mean, I knew he was going to come back because of the bubbles that we saw in the closing shot of the Attack from the Clouds episode.
See, I knew in the very first episode when we saw him in the opening montage, like, oh, that bird's going to make a comeback. This bird's got a good agent.
You paid a lot more attention to that opening montage than I guess I did.
That opening montage rocked. Don't deny that.
But
Don't deny it, I said. Don't deny it.
I'm not denying anything.
All right, thank you.
So the monster bird flies up into the air with his constant shrieking that we got last time and that you just mentioned. And Cornelius immediately assumes that they're being attacked. And Bill gives the most perfect line to lead us into the first commercial break.
Watch those claws. If he rips the fabric, we'll fall like a rock.
And this is a really good line to lead into commercial, as it gives us a sense of doom that will keep us on the edge of our seat till the commercials are over.
All right, now, Mark, this is where the commercial break would roll in, but instead of going to a commercial break this time, let's pay homage to some other shows that, like Return to the Planet of the Apes, also ended in 1975.
progress. 1 Adam 12, handle code 3.
His name's Mannix. Joe Mannix.
All right, Mark, that was a montage of the show openings that ended in 1975.
And it included theme songs to such great shows as The Odd Couple, Adam 12, Ironside, Mannix, and, of course, Gunsmoke.
Now, as a 6-year-old Mark back then, were you saddened by the news that these particular shows were being canceled? What was your mindset?
My mindset at 6 years old was I had no idea that any of these shows existed. Which is very strange because a lot of these shows are favorites of mine now. I love The Odd Couple. I love Gunsmoke. Adam 12, I love Adam 12. If I had been older, I would have been sad to see those go, but at 6 years old, I probably didn't even know they existed.
Yeah, and 30 years later, we would get to see Robert Downey Jr. as Ironside. Nope, wait a minute, that's Iron Man, okay. Now, I don't remember a lot of these shows like yourself. I do remember The Odd Couple, because there was something about Tony Randall that always, I don't know if I wanted to be like him, because he was so organized, and he had his whole life together in conjunction, as opposed to Felix Unger, who was just a total mess. So I think seeing that when I was a kid starts to make sense now. My Star Wars collection, my Planet of the Apes toys were always so immaculate. And that may have been because of Felix Unger. And as for Adam 12, I was always a huge fan of police shows when I was a kid because my father was a cop. So I think watching a police show, I thought, hey, this is a series about my dad. I don't remember these shows ever being canceled. I don't think I ever really knew what that meant.
Did your father watch Adam 12 a lot?
Never. Because you know what? When you're a cop, you don't watch cop shows because you're just pointing out all their flaws.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I have a friend who's a cop and he hates a lot of police movies and stuff like that because they're always getting everything wrong.
Exactly.
And he'll always be like, that would never happen in real life. But he loved Adam 12.
I think maybe back in the 70s, Adam 12 was not the representation of cops back in the day.
I don't know about that because he talks about Adam 12 very highly, and I was always under the impression that it was more realistic than a lot of the shows of today.
I just recall him shaking his head at that show.
Yeah, I don't know. But I do know a bunch of cops, including my friend, who actually really love that show.
You know what? Let's ask the apes. Apes, what do you think? Adam 12, a good representation to the cop life? Let us know at Talking Apes TV on Twitter.
All right, so let's get back to the show. So we fade up from black, back from commercial, and we see the balloon with Cornelius and Bill in it still sailing through the air, and the monster bird is still attacking. But I have a question for you. Is it attacking? With the exception of the ominous music and Bill and Cornelius overreacting, I don't see the monster bird attacking. Much like in Attack from the Clouds, we talked about this, the creature is just kind of flying around and shrieking.
Yeah, and there are some shots of the talons swiping across the frame. Nowhere near the balloon.
Exactly.
So I don't know what they're afraid of. Maybe the creature is saying, hey, I'm going to use my powerful wings to blow you toward Ice Mountain.
And then as they think the creature is going to collide with the balloon, I don't know why they think this, Bill basically decides that all they need to do is to move from one side of the balloon basket to the other side to dodge the bird.
Quick, Cornelius! Over on the other side!
And how exactly would this work?
You're
on one side of the basket, you take one step, maybe it's only a half a step to the right, and this is going to cause the bird to miss the balloon, or cause the balloon to dodge the bird. I didn't understand that.
Yeah, well, what I'm understanding is they're repeating a lot of shots. just to pad this out.
I just feel like if they had taken a breath and paid attention, they would have noticed that through all these padded shots that you're talking about, the creature never once seems to be attacking them. Now, Cornelius notices a cloud that maybe they can use for cover to hide in, because they obviously think the bird's attacking, so let's go hide up in this cloud. And Bill decides that they should lighten the load to increase their speed upwards to the cloud, and he decides they're going to start throwing their provisions over the side. But Cornelius has other plans, and he decides to throw the provisions at the monster bird. Good going, Cornelius. If he wasn't attacking before, he's going to attack now. Let's piss off the monster bird. Even if he was attacking, don't you think that's going to make him angrier?
And Cornelius he's got quite a throwing arm there, too, because there's no wind up or anything. He just tosses it like 3 miles without any kind of wind up. Right. This guy played some ball when he was a kid.
It didn't make sense to me, even if they thought it was attacking, why would you want to make it even angrier? It's not like you have something that's going to take the monster bird down. They're just throwing these little things at him. And with the load lightened, the balloon starts to ride faster towards the clouds, and as they enter into the cloud cover, the monster bird follows. But fortunately, the monster bird has trouble finding them in the clouds, and he eventually exits the clouds, and for the time being, Bill and Cornelius seem to be safe. So now we dissolve to the ape army, and the 2 gorillas are reporting back to Rotok about the balloon.
The humanoids have a ball that floats in the sky.
Impossible.
It's true, Colonel. Both of us saw it.
You think it is some new weapon?
We don't know what it is.
What direction was it floating?
We did not wait to see.
We were afraid it would find us.
Maybe we ought to wait and find out what it is before we attack.
No. Urko's orders are to attack at dawn. Did you locate the opening into the humanoid valley?
We fled when we saw that sky thing.
There isn't time to send another scouting party. We must follow Urko's plan to the letter. That means this army will march all night until we find the way into their valley.
Now, I just wanted to mention something. Even though Rotok keeps mentioning Urko, and it's obvious that Urko is still in charge, he does not go with them to New Valley, and he is no longer going to be seen in this episode. He has officially had his last scene in the animated series, and the episode really suffers from it. We really needed some Urko insanity during some of these scenes to come, but oh well, we're stuck with Rotok as the apes decide to move forward with Urko's plan. So like I said, Urko still is really in charge even if he's not there, so I guess maybe his presence is still there. So they're going to move forward with Urko's plans, and since the 2 gorillas fled from the balloon before finding the opening into the humanoid valley, Rotok says that they're going to have to march all night until they find their way into the valley.
Good going, jerks.
Why couldn't these soldiers be a little bit braver? They would have shot down the balloon, they would have found the opening to the valley, they would have had everything done right.
Exactly.
And they would have proven that they don't need Urko to do this. But now I guess they're kind of proving that maybe they do need Urko. And not only do they need Urko, they need live action Urko. and just so people know, this really is where the episode started to lose me.
It's very symbolic. We lose Urko, we lose the episode.
Yeah, I guess. And this next thing, this is just crazy bad. As we move forward, and the colonel wants the gorillas to move this howitzer up onto a ridge, they run into an obstacle.
Not there, you fools. I want it on that ridge.
But, Colonel, that boulder blocks our path.
Blast it away.
Yes, sir.
Now, they say that this obstacle that they've run into is blocking their path. And this obstacle that's blocking their path, supposedly, is a boulder. Now, the crazy thing about this is we then get a shot of the boulder, and I can't even begin to tell you how it blocks their path.
Wait a minute, hold on. I got to catch up with you here. I'm watching it as we speak, and all I'm seeing is a rock. I'm not seeing a big boulder.
Well, you see the hand pointing?
Oh.
He's saying that's a boulder.
See, things in the ape world, if you look in their dictionary, a boulder is a 2x2 rock.
But here's the thing is as he's pointing at it, it does look kind of like a boulder. In this shot, it looks pretty big in size. It could be a boulder, but it's not blocking anything, and it's not anything they couldn't push out of the way.
For the viewers who haven't seen this, it's about the size of a medicine ball.
Well, you know, in a shot that's coming up, you're going to be able to really see the size of it. But here, I was thinking to myself, it looked like a boulder, but it still didn't look big enough that they couldn't just push it out of their way. And if you look to each side, it's not blocking anything. They don't even need to push it aside. They can just walk around it. Anyway, Rotok in his great wisdom decides that he must blast it away. And so they light this dynamite and they put it next to the boulder. And as we get a shot of the lit dynamite against the boulder, we begin to realize that maybe the boulder is actually maybe half the size of what I thought before. You know, it's tiny, like you were saying. It's small. Like, how is this an obstacle?
It's the kind of thing where you could have lifted it up by yourself with a little bit of effort.
Maybe 2 gorillas it would have taken, no more than that. Anyway, they blow up the boulder, and we cut back to New Valley, where Judy, Zira, and Jeff hear the explosion, and this causes Judy and Jeff to decide they must check it out.
What's that?
Thunder?
I don't think so. Let's check it out and see.
I'm going with you.
No, you must keep out of sight.
So this is a very short scene, it's a very simple scene, and we immediately go back to Rotok, who's surveying the rubble from the boulder before deciding that he wants to move the howitzer to where he originally wanted it, now that the boulder is out of the way. Now, I want you to remember something. There's all this talk of the howitzers and where he wants to place them in this episode. And I want you to remember that we see these cannons, I guess is what they are. Because in a little bit, I'm going to come back to it.
Okay.
So the howitzer is moved into place, and as the apes continue to set up for battle, there's another problem.
Colonel, the men can't see to build their embattlements.
Tell them to use flares.
But won't that warn the humanoids?
I want them warned. The more frightened they are, the quicker they'll surrender.
This is really where I start to question the use of Rotok in this episode. Okay, maybe I should have questioned it with the boulder. But here, it's... I don't know. His plans are really weird. At first, he's following Urko's plans, but this doesn't sound like an Urko plan. By sending up the flares, he's going to let the humanoids know that they're there in order to frighten them into surrender. But couldn't this potentially warn the humanoids, giving them time to prepare for attack?
Rotok's way over his head on this one.
Yeah, but when he says it, at first I'm kind of like, well, that's kind of interesting, cause them to surrender. But then I think about it, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're letting them know you're coming, that you're giving them a chance to go hide, you're giving them a chance to plan for a counterattack. Why would you want them to know? You want to do a surprise attack.
I don't think he really thought this through.
The flares are lit, and they do exactly what I thought they would, because Judy and Jeff, I'm still wondering where Ron is, because Ron should be there. They see the flares, and as we're going to find out in a few minutes, they are going to try and formulate a plan against the apes. But before we get to this formulation of the plan, we go back to Rotok, who notices what he calls a dry wash, which he thinks is the only way for the humans to escape.
Lieutenant, we have to block that dry wash. It's the one way the humanoids could escape.
Dynamite, sir?
No. We may need the rest of it to destroy their caves. There's a better way. Fill the wash with gasoline drums.
This dry wash, I'm not really sure how to explain it. It's almost like if there had been a river.
A stream. A big stream about maybe 10 feet wide.
Right, but there's no water there, so it's as if there was a big stream or river that had been drained.
Right.
And so he calls it a dry wash. Maybe it's because, it used to have water there and now it's dry. And he comments that, as he points to it, that this is the only way that the humans can possibly escape. So he's going to try and destroy this dry wash. Is Rotok just... I know I'm going to keep asking this question. Is he just stupid, or does he not understand the concept of going around things? Because he's now going to try and use gasoline drums in order to cause an explosion and destroy this dry wash, I guess to block the humans from being able to escape. But if you look around the edges of the dry wash, there's plenty of other ways for the humans to flee. Just running through the very few trees that fill the valley.
And why would the humans go right through there, knowing the apes are 15 feet to the right? Why not go the other direction? Why would he think they'll be coming down this ravine? Yeah, he is stupid.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, basically, every time he wants to blow something up, it seems like maybe he's just a pyromaniac. He just wants to blow things up because there just seems to be no point to it. The boulder's not blocking any pathway. This dry wash isn't the only way that the humanoids can escape. I mean, it's really obvious in this one shot that we get that there's so many other ways that the humanoids can escape by just going around the dry wash. Blowing up this dry wash is not going to do anything. I just think he likes to blow things up.
Sometimes these apes think the only way to show power is by blowing things up. Maybe he's taking it one step too far.
So now, before we get to the destruction of the dry wash, we got to go back to Zira, Judy, and Jeff, who are now standing near the Pueblos and deciding what to do.
It's Urko's army, all right.
Urko is nothing more than a scheming outlaw. Wait till I report this to the Senate.
The Senate can't help us now. We have to save ourselves.
How? We have no weapons.
We have one weapon, the airplane. And I'm going to sneak through their lines and get it.
You're going to need a diversion. I'll come with you.
You can't go out there. It's too dangerous.
It will be more dangerous for the whole village if we don't.
How is the plane a weapon? Doesn't have any turrets on it.
I don't know. I guess the only answer I have to that is, we'll find out when we get to that part of the show. But my whole thing about this scene is, stupid Rotok, if he had not sent those flares up, they would not be developing this plan with the airplane, whatever she's going to do with the airplane, to attack the army, to counterattack, to have a defense. If he had just kept those flares pocketed, figured out how to do things in the dark, why didn't they bring flashlights with them? They don't have flashlights. Why didn't they light a fire? Light some campfires.
Use their high beams on their jeeps.
Oh my god, I didn't even think about that. That is... Oh my god. You need to be writing this show. Although now that I'm thinking about it, even if they hadn't sent the flares up into the air, the explosion from blowing up the boulder, well, remember that kind of gave them a little bit of a warning as well. Rotok really kind of needs to learn a little bit about, the sneak attack. I guess what it really comes down to is that I feel like we need smarter officers in the ape army. Because even the humanoids who can't speak and are pretty much like primitives, even they're smarter than Colonel Rotok. So now we know Judy's plan. She's going to go get the plane. Not necessarily sure what she's planning on doing with it. Because like you asked earlier, I'm not really sure how this plane is a weapon. I mean, let's face it, the only thing it really does is drop nets. Anyway, I guess we'll just have to wait and see as we dissolve to two guerrilla soldiers in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know where they are. They're obviously not with the guerrilla army who are at the dry wash, but...
They're somewhere on the planet of the apes.
Right. Well, I guess. that makes sense. So anyway, Judy and Jeff appear behind a boulder behind the two soldiers, because as we learned in the last scene, they're going to have to get past these two soldiers in order to get to the plane. And Jeff takes out the laser drill. All right, we get the laser drill in the final episode. Woohoo! So they didn't forget about that.
Another callback.
We don't get Zeus, but we get the laser drill.
I can make do with that.
And Jeff now uses the laser drill to cut down a tree, which falls and causes a loud diversion so that Judy can get by the two gorillas and head off to the plane. And this is pretty self-explanatory. I just want to know, where is the plane being hidden? And why isn't it being hidden in New Valley, where they could keep an eye on it, as opposed to someplace far away from Hidden Valley that would cause them to have to get by guerrilla soldiers in order to get it?
Maybe New Valley wasn't zoned to park airplanes. Maybe the parking rates were incredible in New Valley. They had to park it somewhere else.
Those all make just as much sense as what I'm seeing here, because it seems to me like if they really wanted to keep an eye on the plane so the guerrillas didn't get to it, they would keep it in New Valley.
Right.
I don't know, just asking.
And those are my answers.
Okay. Now, we then see another flare, and it lights up the sky, and we tilt down to the full guerrilla camp, tents and all, as Rotok prepares his men for attack. And the gasoline cans are all placed in the dry wash, and they're lit, and they're blown up to destroy this dry wash. And a raging fire is lit. And I mean like a major fire. The whole valley seems to be lit on fire. And then we cut to Judy, who is already in the plane. And this is one of those moments that I was talking about earlier when I was saying that things seem to be moving too fast and maybe stuff was cut out because the episode should have been much longer and it should have been 2 episodes. Because when we cut to Judy, she's already in the plane. And I would have liked to have maybe seen her find the plane, get in the plane, and maybe see it take off. And I know that that feels like a lot of padding, but everything here in this scene is just moving way too fast. And it feels to me like it could be a really great scene of the apes attacking and Judy getting to the plane with this, oh no, is she going to make it back in time kind of vibe. You know, stretch out the scene for some tension. But things instead just move really fast, and we get her and she's immediately in the plane.
Why is she even flying by the ape camp anyway?
Well, when you watch the scene progress, you'll see. She's going to defeat the apes with the airplane.
Maybe my DVD had that part taken out of it?
Well, wait a minute. Did you miss something here? Because as the fire is raging, the gorillas move forward with their attack, and Judy is in the plane, and we get this nice shot of the plane flying past the flames, and Rotak notices the plane, and we get this awesome shot of his reaction, and then we kind of get the shot of the troops kind of just standing around as her plane dive bombs on them. She uses no weapons of any kind. She's just basically flying the plane quickly down towards and past them, dive bombing on them like a bird would its prey, and all the gorillas dive for cover. And Rotak orders them to stand firm, and the soldiers just continue to scatter as the plane circles around and keeps just swooping down at them.
Weren't they short on gas? What is she doing showing off this plane like this?
I don't know, but I also don't understand the fact that her taking the plane and just swooping down at the gorillas, that's all it takes to defeat this gorilla army, because the next thing we see is Judy land the plane and she's met by Zira, and through their conversation, we're led to believe that the gorilla army has made a full retreat.
I'm going back to my original question. Why was she even dive bombing them in the first place? I guess her intention was just to scare them away? That doesn't seem like the ape soldiers that I know.
So here's the thing. We're to assume that the whole ape army can now be defeated by an airplane flying towards them. She didn't have a gun on the plane. She wasn't dropping nets. Nothing. She's just flying close to them. And that's how she defeated these gorillas. And remember I said remember the howitzers? Because I was going to bring them up later?
Right.
What about the howitzers? Why were they setting them up? Why didn't they shoot the plane down?
Well, that's kind of where I was going with all this. She knows that they have these howitzers, and she knows they've got all this weapons, and her plane having nothing but a net, singular. Why would she even do this unless she thought, okay, I'm just going to scare them away and they'll run like rats on a ship?
Yeah, it just seems to me, once again, like there was a bigger scene here, but they had to fit it into this last episode, so they cut it way down, and now we get the whole ape army defeated by one plane with no ammunition on it. It just swoops down, and this weakens the villains in this show. I don't think even cartoon Urko would have accepted this, although, you gotta remember that one episode where they were defeated by a shutter being closed. So, who knows? Maybe they would have been defeated by this with Urko in charge. So, this is basically another scene that makes little sense. Things are happening just a little too easily, and I really feel that if this attack on New Valley could have been its own episode, and they could have drawn it out a little bit, they could have done something else with the plane, and maybe the plane had been a distraction and something else had happened. I don't know really what they could have done, but this is not a good conclusion for me.
No.
But unfortunately, this is how Judy defeats the gorillas, and then she lands the plane, like I said before, and meets up with Zira.
You were wonderful.
I didn't see a soldier left in the valley.
Did you see the snake bird while you were up there?
No.
You suppose he went after the balloon?
That's what I'm afraid of.
Poor Cornelius. What good is it for me to be safe when he's in danger?
Now, the most interesting thing about this scene is that Zira asked Judy if she saw the monster bird, or as she now calls it, the snake bird. Do you prefer snake bird or monster bird?
I want to go with monster bird.
Yeah, I like monster bird too.
Snake birds, those are two things that just shouldn't go together.
Well, Zira asked if Judy saw it while she was up there, like Judy was looking for a monster bird rather than concentrating on the gorillas. And when Judy says that she didn't, they then come to the only conclusion that they can, and that is that the creature is after Bill and Cornelius. Not like maybe gone back to its water hole or its cave or anything. It must be chasing down Bill and Cornelius. And this is our uh-oh moment that leads us into the next commercial.
Right. Fade to black. Now, last time we faded out into a commercial mark, we went into shows that were being canceled in 1975. Now, let's do something more upbeat, since this is the very last commercial break we'll ever be talking about. So let's pay homage to the TV series that debuted in 1975.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
So up on your feet, somewhere there's music playing. Don't you worry none, just take it like it's on one day at a time.
Welcome back. Your dreams were your ticket out. Welcome back to that same old place that you laughed about.
All right, Mark, trivia. How many of these shows have not been canceled yet?
1.
And that is?
Saturday Night Live.
How many of those shows should have been canceled? Just Saturday Night Live. SNL, that should have been canceled back in the late 80s. That's just me. That's just me. I've seen some recent episodes, so let's not go there. Let's focus on the really good shows.
First of all, let's face it, we just played clips from some of the greatest theme songs ever written.
Of all time.
Welcome Back, Kotter, Wonder Woman, One Day at a Time, and my personal favorite theme song of all time, Barney Miller.
Growing up in high school, I had a lot of friends who went through that whole band phase, and I had a lot of friends who were really into the bass, and to get their fingers all exercised, they would always play the Barney Miller theme song.
Such a great theme song.
It is.
But I gotta tell you, and I wonder if any of our listeners saw this. I was watching an episode of The Voice, and one of the contestants came on. I can't remember his name. He came on to the blind audition, so this is when all the judges are faced the other way and they can't see him. And he sang the theme song to The Jeffersons, which also debuted in 1975.
Right on.
And he got CeeLo Green to turn for him.
We're moving on up to the east side. Jefferson, to a sea looks so prominent in the sky. We're moving on up to the east side. We finally got a piece of the pie. Fish don't fry in the kitchen. Peas don't burn on the grill. Yeah. Took a whole lot of sobriety just to get up that hill. Now we're up in the big league. Getting our turn it back. Long as we live it's you and me
Dude, I figured the person who would pick to do the Jefferson theme song has got to be a badass. I had to turn it around for you.
Well, thank you.
He really does do a really, really good rendition of one of the all-time great theme songs. And I was just really happy. I mean, when he started singing, I was like, oh, this is so cool. I mean, I'd have been pushing my button right away. I'd have turned for him. So that's how good these theme songs are, that somebody can go onto The Voice singing the Jeffersons theme song and get CeeLo Green to turn for him. How cool is that?
That's very cool.
Yeah.
That's a very risky move, but apparently it paid off.
Yeah, and it was weird because as you're watching it, they cut to a shot of Adam Levine, and he looks over to the other judges like, is that the Jeffersons?
Now, when you were a kid, did you ever get those record albums that had all of these TV theme songs on one record?
Oh, well, yeah, all the time. We have them now. We have CDs of them. I love those compilations of theme songs albums. I mean, I can't really just sit there and listen to them like an album, but every once in a while I'll put them on and listen to them. I use them as ringtones. I mean, I had the Barney Miller ringtone for a long time.
Now that you say that, I want the SWAT theme song as my ringtone. I love that. That was the 45s that I used to bring to school all the time. It was such a great 70s sounding song. Back then, we didn't call it a 70s sounding theme song. It was just a theme song.
But let's get back to the Planet of the Apes. So we come back up from commercial, and we start the next series of scenes that seem to go by too fast. And this whole ending, from the last commercial to the ending, really could have been one single great episode if it had been given the 20 minutes it needed. And you'll see what I'm talking about as we go. Cornelius and Bill are in the hot air balloon heading towards Ice Mountain when they hear thunder. And the clouds have turned into storm clouds, as well as we get some shots of lightning as Cornelius and Bill prepare for the storm. And the wind then starts to blow the balloon all around, and we get this really awesome shot of the balloon just being whipped around all over the place by the wind. It's this really nice long shot, and the balloon's really small in the frame, and it's being whipped around.
Imagine blowing up a big balloon and letting it go. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, it's really kind of cool, and the wind blowing the balloon all around causes the balloon to head straight for the peak of a mountain, which it just barely misses. And then, of course, we get some more padded shots of the balloon, Cornelius and Bill, until they spot, what do they spot?
A Vermont log cabin?
No, Kygor's temple.
Oh, looks to me like a log cabin I once stayed in Vermont.
Right, but it's Kygor's temple, which we remember from the Terror on Ice Mountain episode.
Another callback.
Look down there. It's Kygor's temple.
Set her down, Bill, before we drift off target.
So, as Cornelius suggests, they set the balloon down. And where do they do this?
Right in front of the Kygor ice sculpture.
Right next to the ice statue, which we know because they mention it.
Look, there's the Ice Ape.
Now we know where we are.
Let's hope Kygor still smiles on us.
But what's real important here is the fact that they actually have set the balloon down quite a ways from Kygor's temple, which is where they want to go. And I know that they've set it quite a ways from Kygor's temple because we get this long shot of Cornelius and Bill walking to the temple, and the temple's nowhere in sight.
No.
And I just want to know, why didn't they just land the balloon near the temple? There's plenty of room.
Maybe, once again, it wasn't zoned for balloon landing.
But wait a minute. Later on in the episode, we're going to see, before they take off, that it's in the front yard of the temple.
And kids, that's not a good reason to break the law or zoning restrictions.
Well, I don't know. There just seemed to be plenty of room. It seemed kind of weird that they would land the balloon so far away when they could have literally just landed it right there. We then dissolve to the temple, where Cornelius and Bill are greeted by the llama, or as we called him in the earlier episode, Fu Manchu Ape.
Or I call him Obi-Wan Apenobi. Another callback. You gotta love this episode. It's like the best of Return to the Planet of the Apes.
Although I don't really want to call this episode the best of. So they are greeted by Fu Manchu Ape and his followers.
Who comes to the temple of Kygor? Your friends, O Llama. Do you not remember us? You will be in my mind and heart through all eternity. Welcome, Cornelius. Welcome, Bill. Thank you, O worthy one.
We are honored by your hospitality.
Why have you returned, my friends?
Worthy one, we have come for the ancient book.
The time has come to bring it out of hiding and bring freedom to the humanoids. We fled to the high mountains to gain our freedom. We serve all creatures who seek the full unfoldment of their souls.
So this is a very simple scene of greetings from the Fu Manchu Ape towards Bill and Cornelius, and they, of course, tell Fu Manchu Ape that they're here for the book. And although I felt like there should have been a little bit more before we get to the next scene, there isn't, and we dissolve to the tram that is bringing Cornelius, Bill, and Fu Manchu Ape up to the Ice Ape, which you just told us they landed their balloon next to, which I guess makes me wonder why they didn't just grab the book at that point, and why did they have to make the trek all the way down to the temple to only have to turn around and come back? This doesn't make any sense. So I'm just going to assume when they landed the balloon, they didn't land it right next to the Ice Ape, but they landed in a place where the Ice Ape was in their sights.
Maybe there were two Kygor ice sculptures.
Well, there's only one Kygor.
Oh, I know.
So we dissolve to this tram that is bringing Cornelius, Bill, and Fu Manchu Ape up to the Ice Ape sculpture, because that's Kygor, and he's guarding the book and keeping it safe, and they're almost there.
I believe that's the same tram that I used to get from from downtown Disney into Tomorrowland in Disneyland.
Okay, but anyway, I feel like at this point in the show, everything is just moving a little bit too fast and feeling just really, really rushed. You know, maybe we could have gotten some more character building moments, or maybe the trek to the book could have been a little bit more difficult. Just something to maybe slow it down and add some tension. We just seem to be getting from point A to point B too fast, and everything's just, like I said, too rushed at this moment.
We only have 4.5 more minutes, so they gotta do what they can at this point.
Right, and I understand that, and in that 4.5 minutes, at this point, as I'm watching the show, I'm like, not only do they only have 4.5 minutes, but we gotta get to that scene where they hand the book to the council, because I need my answer. I guess this is just another reason why this section of the show could have actually been its own episode. It needed more time to really pace things out properly.
All right, so they get to the top of Ice Mountain, and there's Kygor.
We get to the bottom of the big ice sculpture of Kygor, where they left the book, and I thought they hid the book in a cave. Didn't they say they were going to hide it in a cave in the Terror on Ice Mountain episode?
No, I don't remember that. I just recall them burying it underneath Kygor in the snow.
Yeah, because I could have swore that they had said something about hiding it in a cave, but they don't hide it in a cave. They just buried it in the snow with no marker to remind them where it is in the snow.
But literally after 2 chops of Cornelius's ice axe, they found it.
Yeah, how did they find that? It could have been anywhere. Like, there's no marker, it's just white snow everywhere.
Maybe it was calling to them.
It would have been acceptable buried in the snow if they had had to look for a while, but they find it, like, instantly. Like, they knew right where it was, like there was a tracker on it, and they could go right to it.
At this point, we only have 4 more minutes, so they can't look for that long.
Right, so they find it immediately, and of course, we as viewers assume, since everything else has been relatively easy in this episode, that getting it to the council at this point is probably going to be relatively easy as well. But as it turns out, it's not going to be that easy, because back on the tram, on the way down the mountain, we run into a little snag. Who should decide he is not through with this episode?
Kygor.
No.
The bird creature, the bird monster.
It's Monster Bird.
It's Monster Bird, and he's back.
And he's not happy. I think it's because he wants to get at Cornelius, because Cornelius was throwing things at him. Anyway, there's no clouds for them to hide behind at this time. There's no provisions to throw at the monster bird. Our heroes seem doomed. What are they going to do? The creature attacks, or at least we're made to assume that the creature's attacking by all the damage we see on the tram, but we never once see the creature actually attack the tram.
No, but the tram is badly damaged. We just don't know how.
It would have been nice to see the creature attack. Now, it wasn't damaged in that long shot we saw earlier, so we have to assume it's the monster bird. So as much as I, kind of want to say earlier that the monster bird wasn't attacking, we got some evidence here that says maybe the monster bird did attack this time, but he had reason to. Cornelius was throwing things at him, so I'm on monster bird's side. And just as we feel like our heroes are doomed and there's nothing they can do about it, we lead into this epic, well, maybe not epic, battle between 2 giant monsters that I'm sure you loved. Because Kygor, the ice ape, his eyes start to glow and the ice starts to break apart and fall away from his body. And Kygor is unleashed to once again save the day. First, by challenging the monster bird to a snowball fight. Yes, that's right. He picks up a snowball and hurls it at the monster bird.
Yeah, he's thinking, you know what? If Cornelius can do it, I can do it.
I'm sure that Kygor is smarter than that, and he was actually trying to take the bird down, but that's the first thought that ran through my head at this point. And then, is it me, or do the many shots of the monster bird flying around shrieking that follow that snowball being hurled at him, do they seem to go on forever?
Yeah, there are 4 random shots in a montage that go nowhere. Is the creature annoyed? What's going on here? I want to know what's going on inside of his head, a bird creature monster's head.
He's just flying around going, hey, why'd you throw that snowball at me? Hey, guys, you guys might want to get your tram fixed. I don't know who did that to your tram, but I'm just flying around here. And so now the monster bird finally looks like he's actually attacking something as he swoops down towards Kygor, who grabs his leg and starts to swing him around in circles before tossing him into the snow and obviously hurting him so badly that it causes the monster bird to flee.
Oh, poor monster bird.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, though. I think that the monster bird is a much stronger creature than that. I would have liked to have seen it to be like a real fight, and I would have liked to have seen him taken down by more than just a toss into the snow.
Yeah. But now we cut to Kygor being hurt.
Yeah, what was up with that?
I never saw the bird creature monster thing connect with Kygor. How'd that happen?
Maybe he was just dizzy from swinging that thing around in circles.
Boy, this show is just full of wimps.
But you notice Bill says,
"He's hurt. Get us back up there. We'll take care of him."
And at first I took this as, oh, Bill's going to do a little bit of Pete and Allen here because he's going to, go mend a creature that he should not know how to help. But then I started thinking about it, and no, he's not going to go help Kygor. Cornelius is. Cornelius is a scientist, and he should know enough about the ape anatomy that he could probably help Kygor.
Right.
But to be honest with you, we're not going to find out because we're not going to see it. We just dissolved back to the temple, and the hot air balloon is now in the front yard of the temple so that Cornelius and Bill can take off and go home.
They're breaking the law. I don't approve of this shot.
Kygor is grateful for your intelligent skill, my friends, and we are grateful for his strength.
My people will honor you both, and always be thankful for your help.
We learn in Kygor's temple that all creatures are here to help one another.
May we return someday with more of our friends?
We will wait and watch for such a happy occasion. Thank you, worthy one. Have a safe journey, my brave friends. We're grateful for everything.
So, Fu Manchu Ape, Cornelius and Bill, they say their goodbyes, and the balloon starts to raise into the air and starts to make its way back to New Valley. So now we can move forward and find out how this book is going to be used to save the day, right?
So we think, yeah.
So we fade to black, and I'm thinking we're going to fade up, we're going to be in the council, and we're going to find all this out because, it doesn't really make sense. But no, wait, they have an answer. They're going to show it to us. It's the final episode. It's actually going to wrap things up.
It's coming. It's coming. It's coming.
No, it's not.
Here it comes. Here it comes.
Nope, sorry. And maybe on your DVD, but on my DVD it didn't come.
No.
This really, really bothers me, and it happens a lot in series television, and it's one of the reasons why now, because TV always has these longer stories that continue from episode to episode, I personally never watch these shows until the final episode is aired, because then I'll know whether they conclude the series or not, and they give it a proper ending, because I don't like being built up, and then never being given a conclusion. And I've seen it happen over and over again. Return to the Planet of the Apes is not the only show guilty of this.
Oh, no.
It just ticks me off because the only person that you're really messing with is the person who stuck it out throughout every episode of your show. They weren't the ones who left you and said, we're not going to watch your show anymore. These are the loyal followers of your show. You should give them an ending. And I was really kind of ticked off here because I really wanted an ending. The show had all its problems, and yeah, the second 2/3 after the first commercial is kind of weak, but yet still kind of fun to watch. But for me, it is really kind of problematic that we're not going to get any conclusions here. We're never going to see them deliver the book to the council, and we're never going to see the council's reaction to the book. As a matter of fact, I want to send out a shout out to Rich Hanley and Jim Beard. Please, when you go get authors for Volume 2 of Tales from the Forbidden Zone, please ask one of them to give us a conclusion to this.
That's a really good idea.
To tell you the truth, as much as this episode has a lot of problems, I think that if they had at least given me a conclusion to this, I would have felt satisfied that I got a conclusion to the series, and that would have at least satisfied me, instead of walking away empty. And so if you ask me about the series as a whole, I don't know if I can recommend the series as a whole, even though there's a lot of good episodes, because nothing in any of the episodes is ever going to find its way to a conclusion.
Very sad, but you know what? The season had a nice wrap-up. So you gotta at least be happy with that.
Well, yeah, if there was another season coming up, this would have been a great cliffhanger ending.
Yep.
Would have been a much more satisfying episode if I knew that there was an episode 1 for season 2 coming.
I was gonna ask you for your final thoughts, but I think you just gave them to us.
Yeah, in a way, but I'll have to admit that as much as I dislike the ending and wish that things had maybe been filled out a little bit more, and maybe we had lost some of the things like the boulder and the dry wash, I'm not going to group this episode together with episodes like Terror on Ice Mountain or Invasion of the Underdwellers in terms of lack of quality. I mean, we have to admit that overall the episode did still have some interesting things in it and still kind of remains somewhat entertaining. And let's face it, kids probably would have really gotten into this episode a lot more than adults because they probably wouldn't have cared about the logic of the boulder. They would have just seen the explosions and kind of been cool with that. And of course, let's not forget the monsters in the end. What kid isn't going to love the monsters at the end?
Sometimes my opinions and thoughts will change from the beginning when we're just starting to get into the episodes because we'll look at different things in a new way. But I like this episode just as much as when we first started going through it. It had two monsters, and the title to this episode, Battle of the Titans, I guess refers to the battle of the two creatures. Now, it doesn't really make any sense. It should be Raiders of the Lost Book. It should be Let's Go Find the Book.
I didn't have much of a problem with the title because I get it. Battle of the Titans. Yeah, I understand that the show isn't really about that. It's more about getting the book. Or at least the first and last sections of the show were about getting the book. But let's face it, a name like Battle of the Titans, that's going to be much more effective in drawing the kids in. And we do get a battle at the end. It's not much of a battle. That's probably the thing as an adult watching it that I'm going to hit on the most is I wish that the trip up to Ice Mountain and the battle and everything had been one episode because then we could have some really cool stuff going on. So that kind of disappoints me and all that. But once again, a kid probably is like you and saw the two monsters and King Kong or Kygor throwing the snowball at the monster and thought it was cool.
Kids at that time that loved Godzilla versus King Kong, this just fed right into it.
Right. So, if I was watching it as a kid, I think I would have enjoyed this episode. I don't think I would have questioned it. The ending might have still bothered me because I'd be like, this is how smart I was as a kid. I'd be waiting for the next episode to show up. No, there has to be another episode. They can't end it like that.
All right. Now, Mark, even though this is the final episode to the Return to the Planet of the Apes series, on our next episode of Talking Apes TV, let's go back and talk about the whole series as a whole series. And we'll go through some of the best and the worst and what we got out of it.
Right, what our final thoughts about the series as a whole were, what our favorite scenes were, what we really loved about it, what we maybe didn't like about it, and such.
And then moving on to discussing where the future of Talking Apes TV will go from there, now that all of the Apes TV has been wrapped up. All right, Mark, with that, let's thank everyone for coming back to Talking Apes TV.
And one thing that I do want to throw out there before we conclude this episode is we want the listeners now, because we're going to be doing an episode that's basically going to be a recap of the Return to the Planet of the Apes series. We want the listeners to maybe, get onto Facebook and tell us what were your favorite episodes? What were your favorite things about the Return to the Planet of the Apes animated series? Maybe tell us some of the stuff you didn't like, some of the stuff you wished that had happened. Maybe some of the stuff you felt like, oh man, I wish they had done this, I wish they had done that. And just give us your comments so that we can read them on the next episode as we pretty much talk about the series as a whole.
All right, with that, let's wrap up this episode of Talking Apes TV. And we want to thank everyone for coming back and listening to this week's show. We sure had a lot of fun doing this one. And once again, kind of sad, it's the last one. But let's go ahead and give a huge thanks to Angela Rushmere, who's been doing such a great job every single episode by listening and finding those particular cells to put up on our Facebook page for everyone to comment on. Thank you, Rob Dellinger, for composing all of the original Talking Apes TV jingles that you hear. And I want to thank my sweetie wife, Sarah, for posting the show every single time we have a new Talking Apes TV for you to listen to. If anyone does want to reach out to us and contact us by email, please do so at talkingapestv@skywalkingthroughneverland.com. You can tweet at us at Talking Apes TV or go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/TalkingApesTV. And if you haven't already liked us on Facebook, please go ahead and do it and then share it with other ape fans. And if you haven't reviewed us, please go ahead and review us on iTunes. You can also find me and my sweetie wife on Skywalking Through Neverland, our Star Wars and Disney podcast at skywalkingthroughneverland.com and retrozap.com. So until next time, where we're going to recap the best and the worst, the highs and the lows. Was that a pig, vampire, or puddle?
Puddle.
Pig. Vampire.
Puddle.
Well, we're going to discuss the whole season/series of Return to the Planet of the Apes. This is Richard.
This is Mark.
Now go ape.
Thank you once again for listening to Talking Apes TV. You can help support Talking Apes TV by posting about us on Facebook, Twitter, or just tell another Planet of the Apes fan. We would also appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes. A link to our iTunes page can be found at skywalkingthrough-neverland.com. Talking Apes TV was created by Richard Wolosky and Mark Augushowitz, with graphic design by Sarah Wolosky. Talking Apes TV is not affiliated with 20th Century Fox or the CBS network, and all names, sounds, or related items of Planet of the Apes are registered trademark and copyright 20th Century Fox, and the respected trademark and copyright holders. All rights reserved. Talking Apes TV is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All the original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Hey Hey Entertainment, copyright 2017. All rights reserved. No part of this show may be repurposed, reproduced, redistributed, or rebroadcast without the written consent of Hey Hey Entertainment.